Guten Tag und herzlich willkommen auf meinem YouTube-Kanal German made easy from scratch. Ich heiße Louise und ich unterrichte seit über 40 Jahren Deutsch. Mein Ziel für heute ist, ein paar Ratschläge über die mündliche Prüfung zu geben. Diese Ratschläge habe ich auch als junge Studentin auf der Universität bekommen. Und die sind immer noch wichtig, glaube ich. Ich erkläre das alles auf Englisch. My name is Louise and I am teaching German for over 40 years now. And I'm doing the oral exam as well. I'm an oral examiner for many, many years now. I think over 30, who's counting at this stage. I myself, as a young student, got these pieces of advice from my lecturer, who's from Mannheim. And I've always kept them, and they have stood me to good stead right up to now. I give them to my own students, and I think these are very, very important. But before we go through his, just a little word of advice is that when you are preparing for this oral exam, you have to be very clear as to your own abilities and what you want to achieve, and also what you have been achieving so far. It's no point in expecting to get 100% in your oral exam if you'd only been getting 50% all along, or if you've been only working towards getting 50% all along. You have to be realistic, is what I'm saying, and not to get upset either if, for example, you don't get the mark that you thought you should have gotten, or you weren't able to answer the questions that you thought you should have been able to answer well. Because if you haven't been getting those type of results all along, you can't expect to get them at the oral exam. But however, you can put in a good bit of work, and even the last-minute.comers who really put in a great bit of work in the last month can really achieve very good results by really knuckling down and getting the work done. What do you really need to get good results at an oral exam? Number one, you need to be able to communicate. First and foremost, you need to communicate. That's the most important thing. Also, if you want to get very, very high marks, you have to make few grammar mistakes. If you want to get very high marks, you have to have a good wide-ranging vocabulary and expressions. If you want to get very, very high marks, you need to be able to have a variety of structures. For example, you could use reflexive verbs, for instance. You could use a variety of tenses. You could use a variety using weil and wenn, putting the verb to the end. You could use the subjunctive, you could use the passive voice. Not all the time, but maybe throw one in here and there to show a knowledge of at least. You won't get top marks if you don't have good communication skills, and that is the key. Then if you're a bit lower down than that, maybe between the 70 and 80 bracket, you're a bit more forgiving on the grammar section. We could make a few more grammar mistakes, but again, you have to be thinking in terms of a good communication skills and good vocabulary and expression. And then further down the line again, to be sort of more forgiving with regards to the grammar mistakes. But again, you still have to communicate. Communication is the key. Now that I can't stress enough. You could make a lot of grammar mistakes, but still able to communicate. And at least you can get the job done. So as you can see, there are many people, let's say, who come to a foreign country and they have a certain amount of vocabulary, but they manage to get their point across. Again, so communication is everything. At the end of the day, you can get a good, reasonable mark if you communicate well. Now, you won't get a top mark, but you'll get a reasonable mark. And that's maybe for many, der Sinn der Sache, the point of the thing. Right, so now I'm going to go through some of the pieces of advice, and this suits everybody from every country in the world if they're doing an oral exam. What he wrote down there, Harald was his name, what he wrote down was Vorbereitung ist das A und O. Preparation is everything. Beginne einfach früh genug mit der Ausarbeitung und dem Lernen. Begin early, preparing and studying. Don't leave it to the last minute, is what he said. Next one he said was, Hindernisse beim Lernen meistern. Get rid of all obstacles to your study. Erstelle einen Lernplan. Create a study plan for yourself. Vermeide Prokrastination. Avoid procrastination. Mach dir einen Lernplan. Make yourself a study plan und halte dich daran and stick to it. I would say to everybody is routine is everything. So say, for example, you had decided that between 7 and 8 is going to be the time I'm studying for my oral. That should be it every night between 7 and 8. Because if you don't stick to the plan, it might never happen, because perhaps a geography essay that you had to write would come in and would be a bit more important, or something, a maths problem that you're trying to do out and trying to finish, and then suddenly you have no oral work done. Decide what time of the day you're going to do your oral work and you stick to it. And then at least you have your preparation done. Another thing he said was, schaffe die richtige Lernumgebung. Die 3 simplen Faktoren, die der Schlüssel für effektives Lernen sind, which are the key for effective learning, or der Schlüssel zum Erfolg, the key to success. Tageslicht, frische Luft und Ruhe. Now, I don't know about the daylight, the fresh air and the peace, but peace and quiet. But I certainly, to me, need to have peace and quiet in order to learn. I can't study in the kitchen where somebody is cooking the dinner. I can't study where somebody is also listening to the radio. I can't study if the television is in the background. I get nothing done. I think I would be better off have 10 minutes or 15 minutes somewhere where I had complete peace and quiet than an hour where there was a television blaring in the background. You really need a dedicated area, a dedicated place, and a dedicated time. This was good one too, and I have stuck to this, and I've always had my pupils stick to this as well. Halte deine Lernmaterialien vollständig. Always have all your learning materials completed right beside you. You have it in a folder, everything in a folder. Now that folder could now be on your computer. That folder could be a physical folder. It could be anything, but have it all together. And du musst immer darauf achten. Now you have to keep an eye on the fact dass deine Lernmaterialien correct sind, that your material is correct. Now that's important. Many occasions I overhear conversations on buses, on trains. Have you got the notes for? Did you get the notes from? Can I have your notes? Now you do not know for sure if those notes are correct. You're only hoping that they're correct. You're better off, number one, with your own notes, and that you had those notes corrected by your teacher. So then you know for sure that those notes are correct. Don't depend on somebody else's notes. Somebody else's notes might not be correct, or they might not be the standard you want. Always remember that. Now this is one that I'm very big into, is Gruppenarbeit or Partnerarbeit. Group work and pair work. Zusammen können wir viel machen. Together we can do a lot. Zusammen sind wir stark. Strong. I always feel like that people tend to, it always never ceases to amuse me. I'm just thinking about things, but it never ceases to amuse me. When I'm going as an examiner into an oral room, and you see all these people sitting out there, they're all going to have the same exam, and they're all very quiet. They're not even talking to one another in German, and they have their notes in front of them, they're looking at them, but they're not even saying them out loud. You have somebody right beside you, and you could practice with that person right beside you. And that person right beside you is getting practice from you too. And that's what you need. Remember, you would never do any exercise, and you wouldn't have a game of football, you wouldn't have a game of tennis without first warming up. You warm up for an oral exam by speaking and by practicing all your sentences, not just sitting down reading. Reading is for your reading comprehension. Lernen mit anderen is what he said, learn with others. Und simuliere die Prüfungssituation. You could do a complete role play here of you being the examiner and your friend being the candidate, and then swapping that around. And it really takes away the fear of the exam as well. Der erste Eindruck is wichtig. Now, whether you know that or not, it does, and whether even the examiners know that or not is another story. But being polite is nice. Anyway, being the first impressions, lasting impressions, they say. I'm not sure, but I know examiners have to be fair and mark everything that they're given and mark every situation. But if somebody is very polite, it sets the tone. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I always like it when somebody says, Guten Tag, wie geht's Ihnen? That's nice. Prüfer sind keine Unmenschen. They're not ungeheuer. They're not people who want to take marks from you all the time. They understand dass die Situation eine Herausforderung ist. They understand that the situation is very demanding and that you're nervous and you want to do well. Sie haben ein Interesse daran, dass du bestehst. They really want you to pass this exam. They have, as I say, 100 marks on the table, which they want to give you. But unfortunately, they can't give you this 100 marks for nothing. You have to do a bit of work for it. And that is the thing about that. If you are well prepared, you will get a very good mark if you have prepared properly for the exam. Now, this is another one. Gib passende Antworten auf die gestellten Fragen. Now, he was very particular about that you always answer the questions you were asked. Now, this is another problem. Sometimes at the oral exam where people learn chunks off by heart and hopes that somewhere in that they will have answered the question. Now, an examiner sees this and understands it quickly that this is learned off material, and the examiner is within his or her rights to derail you to try and find out how much German you actually know and are able to cope with on your own without having all this learned off material. Now, you shouldn't get upset if you're derailed. You could just nod to it and move on. Don't get upset about anything in the oral exam. Because if say, for example, the oral examiner is not smiling at you, that doesn't mean to say that you're not doing well. That might just be the personality of the oral examiner. But the main thing is that you realize that you have to give suitable answers to the questions that are asked, and don't have large sort of pages and pages learned about a topic and then thinking that you're not going to be derailed. You will be derailed because the examiner is not allowed to let you go on and on and on. You have to be derailed. So don't get upset if you are, but nod to it and realize what the examiner has done. If you haven't understood the question, Frage nicht verstanden, dann frag dann noch einmal höflich nach. Ask again for, könnten Sie bitte die Frage wiederholen? Could you repeat the question, please? There's nothing wrong with that at all. Sure, if you're in an interview in English or in whatever language you speak and you didn't understand, you'd ask them to repeat the question. So in a foreign language, it's exactly the same. So you're not going to lose any marks if you ask somebody to repeat the question. So the way to do that is to, könnten Sie bitte die Frage wiederholen? This is one of my favorites. Denk laut, wenn dir die Antwort nicht einfällt. Think out aloud when you can't think of an answer, when the answer doesn't occur to you. An example. Das ist eine schwierige Frage. And a big smile. That is a difficult question. And it gives you time to think. And of course, it's a statement. And it's in German. Ich bin mir nicht sicher. I'm not so sure. Also a phrase in German. A hell of a lot better than a silence. This was my favorite of all. Wenn ich nur gewusst hätte, if I had only known, dass Sie diese Frage stellen würden, that you would ask this question, hätte ich mich darauf vorbereitet. What have you got there? You got the subjunctive. I bring my own learning to my classrooms, and I had some of my high flyer students learn that off by heart, and so that they could get it in. And some of them came out and said they got it in. I got it in, miss. I got it in. And it's always very impressive to get a subjunctive, and that is allowed there. It is allowed, especially in sort of when there's a gap of an area that you haven't really had chance to study. So that's it really, and viel Glück, the best of luck. No matter what country you're in, all of this is relevant. No matter what language you speak, it's all relevant. The most important thing you can do for your oral exam is prepare, and prepare with somebody. Much better than trying to do it on your own. Das wäre es. Und bis zum nächsten Mal bei German Made Easy from Scratch.